it's almost always described by the veterans as the wall.
Right.
And one of the things you make a very important distinction about is to say it's not a wall at all. You originally saw this as
Right.
a geode,
Yep.
as a cut into the earth.
Right.
The surface was polished, which was a way of, the reflectivity, very important to you in creating a distinction between a world beyond the living
Yep.
and the world of
Right.
the living.
And I think there's a phrase, through a mirror darkly, and then I was a bit of a Greek mythology nut, and I kept thinking of Orpheus descending.
Yes.
Now we, the living, we have to turn around and walk back into the light. That the world reflected is this darker world, and the object is not so much the form of the wall itself, it's the names.
Right.
So the names become the object.
Right.
And I think as I was detailing it, because you win it, and then Cooper Lecky I chose as the architects of record because they had done work at the National Zoo. They were perfect to do it. I'll never forget, we would have these debates, and they were like, well, Maya, a veneer, it's so cheap. Why would you want a veneer? Why don't you want to express the massiveness of the wall? And I'm going, but I didn't quite articulate it as well, but I knew it had to be paper thin because it could not read like an insertion of an object into the earth. It had to read as if I'm cutting and then polishing the earth's edges. And so that's just, I was probably working on pure instinct
But also the sighting, and we see a very good example of it here, where you aligned it, the actual angles of the walls were aligned to line up almost like Stonehenge with the Washington Monument to the east and the Lincoln Memorial to the west. And this is what you wrote about it. It would be an interface between our world and the quieter, darker, more peaceful world beyond. I chose black granite in order to make the surface reflective and peaceful. I never looked at the memorial as a wall, an object, but as an edge to the earth, an open side. The mirrored effect would double the size of the park, creating two worlds, one we are a part of and one we cannot enter. The two walls were positioned so that one pointed to the Lincoln Memorial and the other pointed to the Washington Monument. By linking these two strong symbols for the country, I wanted to create a unity between the nation's past and present. I mean, you were subjected to unbelievable personal abuse in the creation of this fantastic masterpiece of memorial architecture. It had a very racist and sexist edge to it. And tell me what it was like to have lived through that period.
Well, luckily, I'm a little bit in my own head. And I'll never forget the first press conference, a reporter says, well, don't you think it's ironic that this is the Vietnam War memorial and you're of Asian descent? And, I grew up in a college campus. It was at Athens, Ohio. And luckily, I had never really been subjected to racism at that point, sexism, ageism. And so I looked the reporter straight in the eye and said, well, that's irrelevant. And I didn't really understand. I understood formally it was very different from anything people would be used to.
Right.
The veterans were probably desperately running to try to protect me from a gook design. You can't let a gook design. I mean, it was there was a lot of controversy, but in a weird way, I was subjected more to the attacks on it as a formal design, like why did you make it black, all that. They sheltered me, and I was happily in my own world fighting on other battles. Like literally, they questioned its color, they questioned below ground, they questioned the chronology of the names.
Everything was politicized about it. One
Everything.
of the things that was astonishing.
We couldn't use granite from Canada because there were draft dodgers there. We couldn't use the Swedish granite, black, because draft evaders went there. And so we ended up with Indian black granite. So everything was politicized. And I had to pretend I stayed very apolitical throughout the whole thing. So
But it must be immensely gratifying to you to realize that even among veterans groups today, I mean, it's one of the standard, I also, like Bob Silvers, will make a detour when I'm in Washington to see it again. And it's a very common experience to see veterans not only in tears, but often sobbing in front of the wall. I mean, it is such a deeply emotionally charged place. And I think one of the aspects, since it was thought of as being such a cool abstraction when it was first seen, is that the physicality of it, the way it takes you through this journey, as you said, and as I write in the book, how there's almost this rising tide of mortality. The names just get way, way, way over your head. And then once you reach the apex and the center and start the upward path again, the names start to recede. And then when you finally get up to the end, it's a completely cathartic experience. And you had this sense of physicality and projection from an extremely, extremely minimalist design. You somehow knew this was going to work.
But I think I still work the same way, and I think there's a scale and a humanness. And there's always almost a psychological dialogue that I'm gonna create something very one-on-one. The other thing is the text size, which I think is very important. And I think we read things. Public monuments are a billboard. Text should be huge, right? The text size on the memorial is less than ½ an inch. So the minute you throw something tiny out there, and this was unheard of, you read it like a book, and you cannot read a book en masse. So no matter how many people are around you, you're still gonna have that same one-on-one, quiet connection. So I think I just work on a very psychological, experiential level, whether I'm making my art, my architecture, the memorial.
Now it's one of the givens of architecture when an architect has a great success, they get deluged with requests for similar projects, similar building types, and of course the calls wouldn't stop coming to you, but you were very reluctant after the initial clamor and then gradual acceptance and great success of the reception of the Vietnam Memorial to take on other jobs. You didn't want to be seen, as I think I wrote somewhere, to be Our Lady of Perpetual Mourning.
I mean, I also finished it and went right back to grad school. I had an attitude that this was an interesting year. It only took a year, which the rule is,
it's remarkable.
If it takes longer than a year, it's not going to get built. Or if it is going to get built, it's going to get modified. So this was about as fast a design project. I mean, it was almost ridiculously quick how quickly we were able to design it and then execute it.